Dead fish carpeted the creek bank in a pale blanket. The water changed color right in front of my eyes, as if someone had poured a bucket of darkness into the earth itself. The chemical stench punched straight into my throat, sharp and cold, forcing me to hold my breath for a beat. I stood frozen in the morning mist, watching small fish bob at the surface, bellies turned up like bent shards of silver metal. The grass along the bank sagged, the leaves curled tight, and the water that had always been crystal clear now smeared into a muddy brown, swirling into thin slick streaks like oil. My name is Ethan Caldwell, 55 years old. Folks around here call me the old man who keeps to himself by the creek, my left leg dragging a little from an old injury. I do not talk much. I do not like gatherings. I like quiet mornings, the steady sound of running water, and the feeling that the ground under my feet is mine, that no one has the right to give me orders. But this morning, the ground beneath me felt like it had just been insulted. I bent down and dipped my fingertips into the water. Cold, slippery, wrong. My heart started pounding harder as I raised my hand to my nose. That smell was not mud, not rotting leaves. It was the smell of something people use to kill. Kill weeds, kill roots, kill life itself without making a sound. I had barely lifted my head when I heard shoes crunching on gravel behind the fence. The footsteps were steady, confident, as if this creek bank belonged to them too. A figure stood on the perfectly trimmed grass on the other side, holding a cup of hot coffee, a light-colored blazer draped over her shoulders. Marilyn Whitaker, the HOA president of Cedar Glass Shores, the woman everyone whispered was a Karen when they thought she could not hear. She looked at the dead fish along the bank, then looked at me. A thin, sharp smile sat on her lips. She spoke in a voice sweet as honey, with a blade hidden behind it. Finally, the view is clean. You should thank me. I felt heat surge up in my blood, but I forced it down. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew that with someone like Marilyn, my anger was exactly what she was waiting for. She wanted me to shout so she could tell the HOA meeting I had lost control, that I was dangerous, that I was a problem that needed to be handled. I looked at her and asked slowly, "What did you do?" Marilyn shrugged and took a sip of coffee like she was savoring a victory. "Just cleaning up. Your creek bank weeds ruin the scenery. People buy homes for the view. I am not going to let some neighbor outside the HOA destroy our property values." Outside the HOA. She pressed that phrase the way you press a bruise, like she wanted to remind me I stood alone, while she had a whole community, rules, paperwork, and the kind of official stamps she believed could crush anyone. I looked down at the water sliding past. This creek does not stop at a fence line. It runs through the reeds, across the low ground, then empties into the landscaped pond they call Private Beach, where they set out lounge chairs, spread artificial sand, and hang resort living signs to convince people to pay more. Marilyn did not know that. Or she knew, but she believed the chemicals would only kill here, would only circle my creek bank, then vanish like a lie in a news report. People like her always believe the world will obediently follow their will. The water will stop when they give an order. The consequences will turn back when they call a lawyer. I heard my own voice, quiet but clear. "Whatever you just poured into this creek, make sure you keep the receipt." Marilyn laughed, short and sharp. "Are you threatening me? An old man who is not in the HOA, who cannot even walk straight. What can you do?" In that moment, I saw her eyes flick over the cane beside me, then over my worn clothes, as if stamping me as someone beneath her. She underestimated me, and that was her biggest mistake. I did not tell her I had spent 10 years working in the county environmental safety oversight department before I retired to live quietly on my family land. I did not tell her I had read flow reports, drainage maps, and records people forgot in storage. I did not tell her the head of the water testing team was still in my contacts, and that person still called me Ethan, not old man. I only stared at the creek, at the dead fish, and it felt like someone had just touched the most sacred thing in my life. Not because of money, but because this was where I learned how to live again, after years when people thought I was nothing but a shadow. Marilyn turned as if the conversation was over, as if she had just stamped a decision onto my fate. Before she disappeared from view, I added one more line, so light it sounded like wind. The water flows downstream, and everything you pour in here will flow with it. 10 to 14 days from now, you will understand." Marilyn hesitated for a beat, then scoffed and walked away. I stood alone by the creek bank, listening to the water keep moving, slow but unstoppable. Inside me, something else began to move too. Not fear, not despair. A cold, steady clarity from someone who understands the rules of the game, understands the land, and knows the loudest person is not always the one with real power. And this morning, the real power was in the water. That afternoon, a white envelope was stuffed into my mailbox, sealed tight like a cold bandage pressed over a cut that was still bleeding. The HOA logo sat in the corner, sharp and arrogant, like a stamp meant to press itself straight onto my life. I carried it inside and set it on the kitchen table. Outside the window, the creek kept flowing, but in my eyes it was no longer a gentle ribbon of water. It was a long cord dragging consequences across every yard of ground, every root, every layer of stone. I opened the envelope with the edge of my fingernail, careful, as if I might tear something valuable. But there was nothing valuable inside, only paper. A violation notice, the language cold and clean like a surgeon's blade. They called my creek bank a hazard, called native plants trash, called natural life an eyesore. They demanded I clear the entire bank within 30 days, cut the brush below a specified height, build a fence to block the view, and pay every cost of remediation if the creek water affected their community. I read to the end and laughed. Not a happy laugh, the kind of laugh you give when you watch someone stride confidently into a mud pit without knowing how deep it is. They wrote as if I were nobody, an old man with a dragging leg living on the edge. They did not know I had something more dangerous than any threat. I had records, I had the habit of documenting, and I had the memory of someone who once lived by principle. Years of field inspections taught me one simple thing. If someone tries to kill you with paperwork, you do not fight back with shouting, you fight back with better paperwork. I did not react right away. I brewed a cup of coffee, sat down, and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a black notebook. I had used it for a long time to record the most important things. Addresses, dates, names, traces. And now I wrote the first line of this war. I wrote Marilyn Whitaker's name. I wrote today's date. I wrote a short line. The water changed color. Fish died. Chemical smell. Then I stepped outside and looked along the fence separating my land from cedar glass shores. On the other side, the grass was trimmed flat like a carpet, the white chairs were lined up neatly, and the private beach sign stood tall, glaring in the sunlight like a fake invitation. I pictured new families arriving, laughing, dipping their feet into the pond, drinking the water they believed was clean. I pictured children running across the artificial sand, unaware that what flowed underground beneath them might be carrying a poisoned needle. That thought made my chest feel heavy. I did not hate all of them. I hated Marilyn. I hated the kind of surface-level power she wore like armor. But I knew that beneath that armor was an entire community. Older people, children, people who only wanted peace. And that made everything more bitter, because Marilyn had turned her ignorance into a danger for other people. When night fell, I did not sleep. Not because I was scared, but because I listened. I listened to the water through the window. I listened to insects. I listened to a vehicle far away, then closer, like a sneaking intention being pulled toward me. I got up, drew the curtain back, and stared toward the creek bank. The darkness was thick, but inside it a beam of light swept across, fast and low. I turned on the camera monitor mounted in the shed. The infrared image snapped to life. A figure appeared at the edge of the fence, short, shoulders wrapped in a light-colored jacket. The figure crouched, dragged something long like a hose, then tilted a plastic can. I saw liquid pour out, not spraying like water, but dropping heavy like oil. The creek accepted it, swallowed it, and carried it away in silence. For a moment, my hands clenched so hard they went white. Anger flared, but I crushed it. I focused on what mattered more. Evidence. I zoomed in. The face was unclear, but one detail chilled my spine. On the plastic can was a large bright label, and beneath it a familiar symbol. I had seen that symbol in hundreds of reports. A herbicide that could wipe out vegetation along the waterline. And if it flowed into a still pond, it could trigger a chain reaction that made toxic algae explode. I shut off the screen, drew a deep breath, and called a number. I was not calling to beg for help. I was calling to activate a gear Marilyn did not even know existed. The person on the other end answered, voice rough with sleep. "Ethan, what is it?" I spoke slowly, each word firm like a nail being driven in. "I need water testing. Herbicide was dumped into my creek. It flows into the HOA pond down there, and I have video." There was a pause, then the voice snapped, fully awake. "Send it to me, right now." I looked out the window. The creek still flowed, black, no foam, no complaint. But I knew that under that silence, a truth was moving, and it would not stop just because a Karen thought she had the authority to order nature around. I sat back at the kitchen table and placed the HOA envelope beside the black notebook. The pain of the dead fish was still there inside me, but above it, something else was rising, hard and bright. Marilyn thought I was an underestimated old man. She did not know I had lived my whole life reading water lines and law lines, and when those two meet, real power shows its face. The next morning, the county pickup stopped right in front of my gate, its tires grinding into the gravel with a dry, cold sound, like a declaration. The environmental department emblem was on the door, the kind most people only ever see when something big has happened. I stepped onto the porch. The morning wind still carried the damp scent of leaves and soil, but down by the creek bank, that chemical smell still clung to the air like a dirty memory. A woman climbed out of the truck, compact build, hair tied in a low bun, gray jacket, a tool case in her hand. She scanned the area once, like she was reading a crime scene, then looked straight at me, no small talk. "I'm Dana Rios, County Water Quality. You called last night." Her voice was not cold, but there was something sharp beneath it, like the blade of someone used to cutting through lies. I nodded and led her down to the creek. She walked slowly, eyes tracking every stain on the water's surface, every curled leaf along the bank, every dead fish caught in the grass. She knelt, pulled out a small test strip, and touched it to the water. The color shifted fast. She rose and let out a long breath. "There's herbicide in here, and it's not the kind someone spills by accident." Hearing that made my chest tighten. Not because I was surprised, but because once a professional says it like that, it stops being suspicion. It becomes a door opening onto what I had already felt coming. I showed her the video. Dana's expression barely changed, but at the corner of her mouth I caught something that was almost contempt. When the footage showed the figure tilting the plastic can and pouring into the creek, she paused the frame and zoomed in on the label. She read the chemical name, then the warning. "This is the kind you can only use near water with a permit, with certified handling, with required safety distance. Dumping it straight into flowing water is a serious violation." She spoke slowly, but every word landed heavy. I stared at the creek, and in my head I saw Marilyn sipping coffee, wearing that thin smile, calling it cleaning up. Dana opened her tool case. She pulled out sample bottles, gloves, labels, a pen. She moved like it was a ritual, so precise there was not a wasted motion. She collected a sample where the water still ran hard, another where it pooled, another right beneath the fence line on the far side where the figure had poured the chemicals. She labeled them, wrote the time, signed her name, then asked me to sign to confirm the chain of custody. I signed, my handwriting trembling slightly. Not from fear, but because I could feel myself turning anger into something else. Into records, into evidence, into a truth nobody could twist. While Dana worked, another vehicle pulled up, a county patrol car. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, hat on, a face set like stone. He looked at the creek bank, looked at the dead fish, then looked at me. Deputy Cole Harmon. He was the person I called after Dana. I did not want this to become a back-and-forth argument between me and the HOA. I wanted witnesses. I wanted someone in the middle, holding the law. Cole walked closer, bent down, picked up a small fish, checked the color of its gills. He set it back down, wiped his hand on his pants, his voice rough. "Do you know who did it?" I did not say a name right away. I only pointed across the fence, toward the brand new roofs, and that sun-glaring private beach sign. I told the truth, enough to start. I have video, and I have the HOA letter demanding I spray and clear my creek bank. They are pressuring me to do what they are now doing in secret. Cole studied me, and his eyes shifted slightly. For a brief moment, it felt like he was weighing who I really was, an old man with a dragging leg, or someone who understood the law better than most people who like to show off power. He spoke quietly, like a warning. Don't do anything yourself. Don't cross over there. You keep everything within the rules. We'll handle the rest. I nodded. But inside me another question echoed. How far are they willing to go? Right then, as if it had been staged to show me their real face, a white SUV from the HOA side rolled up and stopped near the fence. The door swung open. Marilyn Whitaker stepped out, not even glancing around, walking straight in like she was taking the stage. She saw Dana and Cole. I caught the quick flicker of a frown on her face. Then she replaced it instantly with a polite smile, the kind people wear at meetings to hide a knife. Oh, you're here to inspect. Wonderful. We care deeply about environmental safety. Our community has so many families, so many children. Dana looked at her without smiling. She asked only one question, calm but cutting. Do you know who dumped herbicide into the creek? Marilyn tilted her head like an actress, rehearsing in front of a mirror. I've heard Mr. Caldwell has problems with weeds and pests. Maybe he sprayed the wrong way. We sent notices out of concern. And now look. Dead fish. Such a shame. Every word made heat rise in my gut. She had flipped the story right in front of the truth, turning herself into the victim. The speed of her role change was almost frightening. But then the twist she never expected happened right there on my creek bank. Dana raised her hand and held out her phone, the screen showing a zoomed frame from the video. The chemical label was clear, and in the corner of the frame, reflected on the plastic surface, was a small detail I had missed in the dark. A metal plate on the front of the UTV. It carried the landscaping contractor's name, and beneath it was the internal vehicle number the HOA used to manage its maintenance crew. Dana spoke, not loud, but sharp enough to cut clean through. Mr. Caldwell doesn't have this vehicle, but your HOA does. Marilyn froze. The smile on her face turned rigid, like thin ice hitting a jagged rock. For a second I saw fear flash in her eyes, then get yanked back down by habit, by control. She took a step back, her voice higher, harsher. That's just speculation. Someone could have stolen it. He could have faked the video. He hates the HOA. He wants to destroy our reputation. Cole stepped forward one pace. His voice was short, heavy. Ma'am, don't accuse without evidence. We are collecting samples. Do not interfere with the scene. Marilyn looked at me, her stare shooting out like a needle. I met her gaze. I did not smile. I only felt a quiet rise inside me, solid as stone under a creek bed. They can call me an old man. They can try to twist the story. But they cannot twist the water. And they cannot twist things once the county has set foot here. Dana capped the sample bottles and sealed them with tape, like closing a door on every denial. She looked at me, her voice softening just enough for me to hear the truth beneath the professionalism. If these samples come back the way I think, this won't stop at your creek bank. It will go downstream, and it will find exactly where it needs to go. I looked toward the private beach sign in the distance. Sunlight hit it, too bright, like a boast. Inside me, the pain of the dead fish was still there. But beside it, something else had formed, a cold, clear faith. Once the truth starts flowing, it does not turn back, and the person who underestimated me will be the first to feel that current. 3 days later, my mailbox felt heavy, like someone had stuffed rocks inside it. Thick paperwork, red stamps, bold print. They did not just want to win, they wanted to grind me down into an example. I stood on the front steps and flipped through envelope after envelope, a complaint filed with the county accusing me of illegal discharge, a report sent to the state environmental agency claiming I was contaminating the water supply, a demand notice ordering me to provide business records, as if I were running a chemical plant instead of living on a patch of rough land by the creek. And in the middle of it all, One sheet made me laugh without a sound. A letter from the HOA's attorney demanding I cease all activity on my land because it was harming the community's property values. I could hear Marilyn's voice in my head, smooth as silk, "Watch me prove you wrong." She did not understand one thing. I had seen this kind of war before. It does not start with guns, it starts with paper. I carried the stack inside and set it on my kitchen table. Dana had told me to keep everything. I did more than that. I sorted it by time, by sender, by purpose. I numbered the corners in pencil. I photographed every page. I scanned them. I saved them to a hard drive. Then I sent copies to Dana and Deputy Cole, not because I enjoy going overboard, but because I know that in a game where the other side attacks with paperwork, the survivor is the one who turns paper into a shield. By late afternoon, Cole stopped by. He stood in my kitchen, staring at the pile of files like it was a minefield. He shook his head, his voice dry. "She's trying to make it feel like you're guilty. When there's enough paperwork, people start believing there must be fire, even if it's only smoke they lit themselves." I looked at him and asked, "What about the water samples?" He did not answer right away. He glanced out the window toward the creek, then spoke slowly, like he was saying something he did not want to say too soon. "Dana is waiting on the lab results, but I got a call from someone. They put up roadblock signs on the HOA side. They're setting up a guard post." A guard post. Hearing those words almost made me laugh. Marilyn's HOA had turned a neighborhood into a tiny country where she was the queen. I stepped outside and drove down the dirt road that ran parallel to the creek. When I arrived, the sight made my blood rush into my ears. A small booth had been set up right beside the trail, a generator buzzing, gasoline exhaust mixing with the chemical creek smell to create a filthy, nauseating air. Two men in polo shirts stood in the way, clipboards in hand, acting like they had authority. On wooden stakes, they had hung "No trespassing" and "Residents only" signs, large and red, like they were guarding a military base. A local family pulled up. A gray-haired grandfather held the hand of a kid around 8, a small fishing rod slung over the child's shoulder. The kid looked past the booth toward the creek, eyes bright, then got stopped. "You can't go in," one guard said, his tone like he was shooing a dog. "This is HOA property." The kid looked up at his grandpa. "But you promised." "We were going fishing." My throat tightened. Not because they were blocking me, but because they were blocking a child, and doing it like it was their right since the beginning of time. I walked closer and kept my voice calm. "This trail has always been here. What are you basing this blockage on?" The guard looked me up and down, saw the slight drag in my leg, saw my old clothes, and gave a sneering smile. "HOA orders. The president says nobody gets through. If you're not in the HOA, then definitely not." That "definitely not" sent a cold line down my spine. Marilyn did not just want to control the land, she wanted to control people's feelings. Who belongs, who does not? Who gets to pass, who does not? I did not argue. I turned my back and called Cole. When the patrol car arrived, the rhythm changed like someone slammed on the brakes. Cole stepped out, walked straight to the booth, looked at the signs, the generator, the name sheet listing the guards. He asked one question, his voice hard. "Who authorized you to set this up?" The guard looked up and suddenly seemed smaller. "The HOA, sir." Cole nodded like he had heard exactly what he expected. He turned to me and lowered his voice. "Don't touch anything. Don't take the signs down. Leave it exactly as it is." I looked at him. "Why?" Cole met my eyes, not joking. "Because it's evidence. The more she misbehaves, the thicker the file gets. And once the file is thick enough, no attorney can lift Marilyn out of the hole she dug herself into." Right then, a spotless white SUV rolled up. Marilyn stepped out like this was her stage. She wore expensive athletic clothes, dark sunglasses, her phone in her hand. She saw Cole, and for a split second I watched her blink, calculating. "Deputy," she said, her voice sweet. "We're just protecting residents. There's a contamination risk. Nobody wants children touching dirty water." Cole looked at her, his voice flat. "Are you protecting residents, or are you blocking access?" Marilyn smiled. A little too much. We're following HOA rules. And then the twist that exposed her without me saying a word landed hard. Cole moved closer and looked her straight in the eye. HOA rules are not higher than county law. And this is not your front gate. This is land outside the HOA, and this obstruction can become a crime if it interferes with lawful access. Marilyn went still. I saw her hand tighten around her phone. For the first time, her smile was not sharp anymore, it trembled. She turned to me, eyes burning. What kind of stunt are you pulling? I looked at her and spoke slowly, loud enough for both guards to hear. I'm not pulling a stunt. I'm standing here. You're the one who built the booth. You're the one who hung the signs. You're the one who turned this into a war. Marilyn opened her mouth like she was about to say something, then swallowed it. She spun on her heel and walked off fast, like retreating from a fight she had just realized she no longer controlled. I watched her go. The creek kept flowing. The booth kept buzzing. But inside me, one thing was clear. Marilyn was panicking, and when a Karen starts panicking, she does something even dumber to grab back control. I did not know what she would do next, but I knew I would not run. I would stand right here, on my land, and let everything she poured out flow to exactly where it was meant to go. That night, my motion sensor alarm screamed, sharp and harsh like metal scraping glass. I jolted up from my chair, my heart hammering, and for the first second I thought the creek had risen again and carried more dead fish all the way up to my porch. I ran into the storage room and switched on the security monitor. The infrared feed came up in pale gray blocks. And there, right in front of my shed door, a figure was hunched low, both hands gripping a crowbar, trying to pry the lock. Every time the steel hit metal, the sound rang out dry and ugly, like teeth grinding. The figure lifted her head at the exact moment the floodlights snapped on. The beam hit hard, merciless, exposing her face in an instant. Marilyn Whitaker. No sunglasses, no smile, only wide pale eyes, and a sudden panic flashing across her features like paint being stripped away. She froze for a beat, then spun and ran. She ran clumsily, shoes sliding on gravel, her jacket catching on the fence, leaving the crowbar behind to clang against the concrete. Watching it, a cold feeling spread through me. Not fear, clarity. The kind that comes when you realize a Karen does not just want to win. A Karen wants to erase the evidence. I did not rush outside. I did not grab a gun. I did not shout. I did exactly what the years had taught me to do. I picked up my phone and called Deputy Cole. My voice stayed low and tight. There's a break-in. I have footage, and she left something behind. Cole arrived faster than I expected, with another unit. Red and blue lights swept across the trees and over the dark creek bank, flashing like warnings. He walked into my yard, looked at the crowbar, looked at the shoe prints mixed into the gravel, then looked at me. You're sure it's her? I pulled up the clip. I did not need to say much. The image spoke for me. Cole let out a long breath. In his eyes, I saw something like exhaustion, like he had dealt with this kind of person too many times and still never got used to it. He spoke slowly, but firm. This is unlawful entry, and it's going into the report. I stared toward the fence. On the other side were rooftops glowing with warm lights, peaceful as if nothing had happened. I pictured Marilyn sitting somewhere, hands still shaking, telling herself everything would be fine if she could just destroy the camera. But there was a twist she did not know. I had not relied on a single device. My system automatically uploaded recordings to remote storage. Even if she broke in, it would be useless. People used to think I was just a quiet old man who did not understand technology. They were wrong. I had done safety oversight. I had worked with reports. I had learned that the most valuable thing is not the hard drive sitting in a shed. It is the copy, the one stored where other people cannot reach. The next morning, as if to claw back what she had lost during the night, Marilyn launched another strike. Fast and dirty. The entire neighborhood's inboxes exploded with an urgent notice. The subject line hit like a hammer. An emergency meeting regarding the risk of water contamination. The message read like an indictment. The creek was polluted. The contamination risk could spread to the community pond. And the cause might come from the property outside the HOA. She did not use my name. She did not have to. Everyone knew who she was pointing at. Then I received a strange text. Only one sentence. Don't let her turn you into the villain. Beneath it was a phone number. I called back. A woman answered, her voice rough and quiet, like someone speaking while afraid of being overheard. Linda Park, the HOA treasurer. I don't know you, I said. Linda hesitated, then words spilled out like she had been holding them in too long. I don't want to be involved, but she went too far. Marilyn used the HOA card to buy herbicide. She called it emergency landscaping. She told me to sign because it was a small expense from the maintenance fund. I went still. In my mind, the pieces clicked into place. The receipt, the source, the signature. And now, with last night's break-in attempt, Marilyn had stamped a bigger question mark on her own forehead. Linda kept talking, her voice shaking. I have a copy. I photographed it before she could delete it. I'll send it to you. But please, don't let them drag the whole community down with her. There are kids. There are older people. We don't know where the water comes from. We only trusted her. I looked out the window. In the distance, the private beach sign still stood there, glossy and innocent, like a lie waiting to be exposed. I spoke to Linda slowly. I don't want to drag anyone down. I want to pull the truth up. Linda was silent for a few seconds. Then she exhaled like someone who had been holding air too long. You're not what she said you were. I almost laughed, but my throat tightened instead. I had been underestimated my whole life, not only because of my dragging leg, but because of my silence. People assume silence is weakness. In truth, for someone who understands the law and understands moving water, silence is how you keep your mind from getting pulled into the mud of emotion. The call ended, and a few minutes later, a photo came through. The herbicide purchase receipt, in the HOA's name, a large quantity. The purchase date, right before the night the creek changed color. I sat down at my kitchen table and placed the photo beside my black notebook. Outside, the creek kept flowing, carrying what Marilyn thought she could hide. She was preparing a meeting to blame me, but now I had the thing a Karen hates most. A paper trail, straight, clean, impossible to bend. I closed my eyes for a second and listened to the distant sound of water. Inside me, it was no longer only anger. It became a steady resolve, like stone on a creek bed. I would not shout at that meeting. I would not argue with my mouth. I would let the truth appear at the right moment, in front of the right people. And when it did, Marilyn would learn a lesson the HOA could never teach. Consequences do not need a permit to flow. On the 10th day after the water changed color, Private Beach started to stink like a wound that had been bandaged for too long. The surface turned green in a way no one wanted to look at, like someone had poured paint over their dream and stirred it with a cold hand. I stood on the bank of my own creek and watched the current slide quietly over the rocks. It was not loud, it was not angry, it was only doing what water does, flowing downhill, carrying everything that had been poured into it. When I closed my eyes, I pictured what lay downstream, the white lounge chairs, the resort living signs, the artificial sand they had bragged about like a victory. I pictured children's bare feet, and I felt something heavy in my chest, both anger and worry, like two stones pulling in opposite directions. Dana called me that morning, and her voice was no longer only professional. There was something in it that sounded like a real warning. The lab results are back. It's herbicide. The concentration is high enough to trigger a chain reaction in still water. If the weather stays hot, and there isn't much rain, the algae will bloom. 10 to 14 days is the danger window. I asked, my voice rough. Is it still in time? Dana paused for a beat, then said, whether it's in time depends on whether they're willing to listen. But we have to do this the right way. Warn them first, publicly, and document it. The moment I heard the word publicly, I understood. Marilyn was getting ready to hold a meeting and pin the blame on me. I could not let her control the stage, but I also could not turn that meeting into a shouting match. Someone like Marilyn feeds on shouting. She is at her strongest when she can provoke someone into exploding, then step back and play the victim. I looked down at my left leg, the one that still dragged a little, and for a moment it almost felt funny. Marilyn sees that leg and thinks I am weak. But my real power has never been in my legs. It is in what I know, what I have learned, and the calm I can hold on to when other people start shaking. That afternoon, Dana and Deputy Cole came to my house. Dana spread a topographic map across my kitchen table. Red and blue lines ran through it like veins. She pointed to my creek, then traced her finger along the narrow lines leading down to the HOA pond. "The water moves like this," she said, "and this is where the pond receives it. If the algae blooms, they will have to shut the beach down, not only to save face, but to avoid risk to children and pets." Cole stood beside her with his arms crossed and added one short line. "And if they try to cover it up, they'll make everything worse." I asked, "What's the plan?" Dana opened her case and set a small test kit on the table. Plastic tubes, reagents, a color chart. She spoke like she was giving instructions for surgery. "We'll take 3 samples. Clean upstream, right after the dump site, and near the inlet of the HOA pond. We'll run the test live at the meeting. The color will change right in front of them. No one can argue with color." Cole added, "I'll be there, so no one touches you, and so no one takes down the environmental warning sign." I looked at the two of them and felt something warm spreading in my chest. Not because I enjoy being protected, but because I know there are still people who believe in right and wrong. And when right and wrong stand together, a Karen's ego is just noise. That night, Linda called again. Her voice shook more than before. "Marilyn is panicking. She says the meeting is to save the community, but really it's to push the blame onto you. She says everyone has to attend, and she told me if anyone asks about the emergency landscaping expense, I have to say it was a group decision." I could hear Linda's breathing, quick and tight. She was not a bad person. She was just trapped inside a system Marilyn had turned into a weapon. I spoke gently. "Linda, you don't have to lie anymore. Just stay quiet and let the records speak." Linda choked on the words. "I don't want to get sued. I don't want to lose my house." I looked out the window. The HOA rooftops glowed like glass boxes. I understood that fear. For them, the house is the biggest asset they own, and the HOA is what they believe protects that asset. They do not imagine the HOA can become the threat. I said, "If you want to keep your house, you need the truth even more. Marilyn is dragging the whole community down with her." The call ended. I sat alone and listened to the water outside. In my head I could see the meeting, Marilyn at the microphone with a serious voice, pointing at me. I could see hundreds of eyes turning, full of suspicion. I could see the moment an underestimated man becomes the scapegoat. Then another picture came, sharper. I saw Dana placing 3 sample bottles on the table. I saw the color shift. I saw the warning sign going up at the entrance. I saw Marilyn standing there frozen, her smile stiffening, nowhere left to hide. I opened my black notebook and wrote a new line. The meeting. I was not writing to prepare words. I was writing to prepare the truth. Tomorrow, Marilyn would try to use the HOA stage to tell a story. But I would bring what a stage cannot hide: water, color, and the downstream path she had forgotten. The community hall doors swung open, and a wave of heat rolled out like the breath of a cornered animal. Inside, people were packed tight, conversations layered over each other into a heavy, thick noise, like fog. The moment I stepped in, I felt eyes turning toward me, mixed with curiosity, judgment, and a kind of confusion they had not dared to name out loud yet. On the stage, Marilyn Whitaker stood behind a wooden podium, the microphone buzzing whenever her hand brushed it. Her blazer looked bright and perfectly pressed, her hair slicked smooth, her smile placed just right like a mask. Behind her was a large board printed, with an image of private beach, water clear and blue, children laughing, white lounge chairs spotless. A picture so beautiful it felt fake, and I knew it was about to shatter. I did not sit in the front row. I chose the middle, close enough to hear, far enough not to get pulled into her stage. Dana stood toward the back on the left, a tool case in her hand, her face calm as stone. Deputy Cole stood near the door with his arms crossed, his gaze sweeping the room like radar. Looking at them gave me something to hold on to, not to fight the crowd, but to keep a path open for the truth. Marilyn tapped the microphone and her voice carried, sweet and firm like a declaration. Thank you all for coming. We are facing a serious environmental threat. I'll be direct. Our water supply is showing signs of contamination. A ripple of murmurs moved through the room like a draft. A woman clutched her purse, eyes wide. An older man frowned and muttered something under his breath. I heard the word contaminated hanging in the air, and I felt fear spreading fast, like algae blooming across a pond. Marilyn lifted her hand and pointed to the photo of the lake. Her voice dropped, as if she were sharing the community's concern. Private beach is our pride, the value of our homes, the safety of our children. But recently, there has been a creek flowing into the lake. That creek comes from property outside the HOA, and there are signs someone handled chemicals improperly. She did not say my name, but the entire hall turned to look at me. Some stares were sharp as needles, some carried a mix of pity and contempt. I heard someone speak very softly, but loud enough for me to catch. That's exactly like him. Always letting weeds grow wild. Marilyn saw that reaction, and it seemed to energize her. She stepped forward, her voice rising. We tried to work with that landowner. We sent notices. We offered cooperation, but he refused, and now the community is paying the price. My throat burned. Part of me wanted to stand up right then, to say she was lying, to say she was the one who dumped it, but I swallowed it down. I had not prepared to win with volume. I had prepared to win with a truth that could not be bent. Dana stepped forward at the exact moment Marilyn was about to turn her lie into a sentence. Dana did not ask permission. She simply walked, calm, like someone stepping into a fire scene. My name is Dana Rios, County Water Quality. I'm here in response to a request for inspection. Marilyn blinked, and her smile shifted slightly. She forced a small laugh. Oh, wonderful. We always cooperate with agencies, but this meeting is internal. Dana looked at her, her eyes steady. The environment is not internal, and water does not read HOA rules. A short, startled laugh broke out in a corner, then died instantly. I saw people start leaning forward, as if they had just heard a line that cracked Marilyn's monopoly on the room. Dana set 3 sample bottles on the table in front of the stage. The first was clearer. The second was cloudy with streaks. The third had a strange tint, like water mixed with chemicals. She spoke clearly. Sample 1 was taken upstream, where the creek has not been affected. Sample 2 was taken directly below the fence line on the HOA side. Sample 3 was taken near the inlet where water enters private beach. Marilyn burst out, "This is staged." Dana did not look at her. She opened the test kit, pulled on gloves, and added reagent to the first bottle. The color barely changed. She added reagent to the second. The color shifted fast and sharp, like a bruise blooming under skin. The room held its breath. She added reagent to the third. The color came up even stronger. A man jumped to his feet. "Why is the water near the lake worse?" Dana turned toward him, her voice even. "Because the flow carries it, and because there is herbicide." The word herbicide dropped like a hammer. I heard voices piling up all at once. I heard a woman panic and call her child's name. I heard an older man curse. And I saw Marilyn on the stage, her face beginning to lose color. Marilyn slapped the podium. "Silence. Silence. Everyone needs to stay calm. I already said it. The landowner outside the HOA could be the source." I stood up, slowly, not letting anger lead. I took 1 step and felt every eye fall back on me. I heard my heart beat, but I kept my voice low and firm. "I did not spray anything into that creek, but your HOA did." Marilyn gave a bitter laugh. "That's slander." I raised my phone. The screen showed the receipt photo Linda had sent, the vendor name, the chemical type, the payment charged to the HOA card. I placed it on the table like dropping a stone into water, and I waited for the ripples. I continued, each word tight and clear. "The receipt is in the HOA's name. The purchase date is right before the night the creek changed color, and my camera recorded someone dumping into the creek using an HOA maintenance vehicle." A sharp inhale cut through the room. Several people snapped their heads toward Marilyn. I saw a middle-aged woman with red eyes whispering as if to herself. It can't be, Marilyn couldn't do that. Marilyn stepped back. She opened her mouth, but the words got stuck. In her eyes, I saw something raw. Not power, fear. Deputy Cole moved forward, his voice short like a command. Ma'am, do not leave. We need to clarify a few things. Marilyn looked around as if searching for an exit in a sea of people. And right then, the board behind her, that photo of blue clear water and laughing children, turned into a cruel joke. Because down there, the real lake was changing color, and in this room, the real mask was cracking. I stood in the middle of the noise, feeling both cold and bright. I was not happy that they were panicking. I only knew one thing had arrived, the moment no one could avoid anymore. The water had flowed, and so had the truth. Marilyn screamed, and her scream cut through the hall like shattered glass. I had never heard her lose control like that, not the sweet voice she used to play leader, but the voice of someone watching the wall she spent her whole life building begin to collapse. You're causing chaos. He's manipulating you. He hates us. He wants to destroy home values. This is all dirty games. But her noise was no longer power. It was only noise. The people in the seats looked at each other, their expressions changing fast, like the water in Dana's bottles when she ran the test. I saw a man stand up, face flushed red, his voice raw with anger. You say he's destroying home values, but your beach is green like a stagnant pond. My kid swam there last week. Do you even understand what you've done? Another woman burst into tears, clutching her phone. I'm pregnant. I drink the water at home. You said it was safe. You swore it was. Marilyn took a step back, fingers digging into the edge of the podium. I saw her glance toward the door, like a cornered animal searching for a way out. But the door was no longer a door. It was where Deputy Cole stood, shoulders wide like a barrier. And in the middle rows, faces that used to stay silent were rising to their feet. I heard Dana speak, her voice calm to the point of cold. I need everyone to understand this clearly. This is a preliminary warning. We are conducting an official assessment. But starting now, no one is to swim in the lake. No one is to let pets into the water. And if there are signs of toxic algae, there will be an order to close the beach. Marilyn tried to cling to one last thread. She turned to Dana, her voice trembling as she fought to sound composed. You can't give orders here. This is private property. Dana looked at her, no raised brow, no smile. The water is not your property, and toxins do not ask the HOA for permission to spread. Someone let out a bitter laugh. Marilyn's face reddened, lips pressed tight. She turned to me, eyes sharp as needles, as if she wanted to stab straight through. You staged all of this. Where did you get that receipt? You bribed the treasurer. I cut her off, short. I didn't bribe anyone. I simply let people see what you didn't want them to see. I stepped forward one pace, not to dominate, but to make it clear. I saw hesitation flicker in a few faces. They were standing between two stories. On one side was the woman they had trusted, the one who always talked about property values. On the other side was the neighbor outside the HOA, dragging his leg, living quietly, now laying out paperwork, video, and live test results right in front of their eyes. Marilyn understood how dangerous that moment was. And like every Karen when exposed, she chose the dirtiest move. She whipped around toward the seats and pointed at Linda Park, the HOA treasurer, who was sitting hunched down like she wanted to disappear. Her. She's the traitor. She leaked documents. She's colluding. I'll sue her. Oh. Linda shot to her feet, hands shaking, but her voice came out clearer than I expected. No. You don't get to dump this on me anymore. I told you to stop. You told me to sign because it was a group decision. But you decided on your own. You bought the chemicals. You gave the orders. You even said if anyone didn't obey, you would fine them and force them to sell their house. The room exploded. People talked all at once, like a startled flock taking flight. Questions hit like thrown rocks. You really forced people to sell. What did you do with the fund money? What right did you have to hire guards and block the road? Did you break into someone's shed? Marilyn looked around, eyes wide, mouth opening and closing. She had no script anymore, no stage anymore, only raw truth whistling around her like cold wind. Deputy Cole stepped forward, not loud, but enough to silence the room. There's one more thing. Last night, someone tried to break into Mr. Caldwell's property to get the camera. We have footage, and we have physical evidence. Marilyn flinched like she had been slapped. She turned to Cole, her voice piercing high. You can't prove that was me. Cole stared straight at her and spoke slowly. The video shows a face, and the evidence has fingerprints. We will follow procedure. I watched Marilyn's shoulders sag. In that moment, she looked older, smaller, like someone pulled off an imaginary throne and set flat on the floor. But what surprised me most was not her collapse. It was the crowd's reaction. I saw a man who had looked at me with contempt lower his head and mutter an apology. I saw a young woman holding her child, eyes red, looking at me like she had just realized I had been trying to protect her kid before she even understood the danger. And that was the deeper twist. Marilyn thought power was a microphone and a crowd. I knew power was truth that gets documented, tested, and spoken at the right time. I was underestimated. But I kept the path clear for truth while everyone else only thought about the path of power. Dana turned back to the room, her voice softer now, like she was trying to keep the community from tipping into full panic. If anyone has symptoms of illness after contact with the lake water, contact a medical facility immediately. We will set up a water sampling point at the center starting tomorrow. And please, don't trust rumors, trust the testing. Marilyn heard the word testing and looked like the last strength drained out of her. She stepped back, then another step, until her back touched the large photo board of the lake. The beautiful image trembled slightly from the movement, like the very dream they bought was shaking. I watched and felt a quiet sadness, not for Marilyn, but for how one person could drag an entire community into danger just because she hated a wild strip of creek bank. The meeting ended without applause, only chairs scraping, hurried footsteps, phones calling. Cole told Marilyn to stay behind for questioning. Dana packed up the sample bottles, careful as if gathering shards of glass. I walked outside. The night air hit my face, cold and clean. Far off toward the lake, maybe it was only my imagination, but I thought I saw the green smear thicker on the surface, a reminder that consequences were still flowing. I stood there for a moment, listening to wind moving through the trees. I did not win by humiliating someone. I won by staying upright in the mud, waiting for the water to carry the truth to where it was always going to end up. The next morning, a red sign was posted right at the entrance to Private Beach, the letters so large no one could pretend they did not see it. No swimming. Do not touch the water. Do not allow pets into the lake. Water quality warning. I stood at the edge of the artificial sand and watched a scene that, just 1 week earlier, still looked like an advertisement. The white lounge chairs were still lined up in perfect rows. The shade umbrellas were still stretched tight, but the lake was no longer the lake from the brochure. It was smeared green, thick, with patches of scum floating like diseased skin. A rancid stench rose with every gust of wind, mixing with the lingering scent of sunscreen in the sand, creating the sickening smell of a dream rotting from the inside. A young mother stood beside me, holding her child. She stared at the sign, her lips trembling, like she was trying to swallow a sob. The man next to her gripped the handle of a stroller so tightly his knuckles went pale, his eyes red with anger. I heard them whisper about Marilyn, about last night's meeting, about the receipt, about the video. Their trust was dissolving like foam on the surface, fast and impossible to gather back. In one corner, Dana had set up a sampling table. She worked like a machine, calm, precise. Next to her sat a cooler, sealing tape, and instruction sheets for residents. Deputy Cole stood farther away, talking with a few men in county reflective vests. The atmosphere felt more like an incident scene than a resort. I thought I would see Marilyn here, shouting, arguing, trying to seize the stage again, but she did not show up. She vanished like a shadow the moment the lights came on. The twist came from a place I did not expect. While I was watching the green slick on the water, my phone buzzed. An unknown number, I answered. A man's voice came through, rough, tight, like someone standing on the edge of a cliff. Mr. Caldwell. This is Marcus Whitaker. I went still. Marcus, Marilyn's husband. People rarely mentioned him, as if he were only a shadow behind her. I expected threats, pleading, excuses. But his first words made my spine go cold. She's trying to pull money out of the HOA account, and she told me to stay quiet. I can't anymore. I stared at the green-stained lake, listened to the wind, and felt another truth rising out of the mud. Marilyn had not only done wrong. Marilyn was preparing to run. Marcus spoke fast, breath-breaking. She says, if we can get through a few weeks, people will forget. She says she'll blame everything on the contractor. She says I have to sign a statement saying it was the fault of a maintenance worker. But I know. I drove the vehicle for her that night. My heart jolted, not from surprise, but because when someone who has stayed silent finally starts talking, it usually pulls real collapse behind it. I did not shout. I did not curse. I asked, my voice low, "What do you want, Marcus?" There was a long pause. I could hear heavy breathing on the other end, like someone who had been running too far for too long. I want it to stop. I want my child not to be hated because of her. I want to do the right thing, even if it's late. I can't stand it anymore. You have to believe me. I'll tell them. I'll bring evidence. I looked around. The young mother was still there holding her child, eyes fixed on the lake like she was staring at something she could not understand. I thought about these people, about how they trusted an HOA to protect them, and now they were standing in front of a poisoned lake. I said, if you want to do the right thing, don't tell me. Tell Dana and Cole, and say it in writing, in an official statement. Marcus swallowed. I'm afraid of her. I spoke slowly, each word landing like a nail into a tabletop. You're afraid, because you think she has power. But the real power now is the file, the testing, the investigation. She can't control this anymore. Marcus went quiet. Then he said something small, almost like a confession. I always thought the HOA was just her game. But now I understand. That game can kill people. The call ended. I stood for a few seconds, feeling like I had just heard a locked door finally snap open after years. I turned toward Dana. Dana, I called. She looked at me, eyes steady. I kept it short so I would not shake the air around us. Marcus Whitaker wants to confess. He says he drove the vehicle that night. Dana did not show much, but I saw her shoulders tighten slightly. She nodded. She turned to Cole and called him over. The two of them spoke in low, clipped sentences, like fitting the last piece into a picture. That afternoon, more county vehicles arrived. They brought equipment, posted more signs, stretched caution tape. A group of residents formed a small circle, talking, pointing. Some were furious and demanded lawsuits. Some panicked and asked if the tap water was safe. Some just stood still, faces empty, like they had realized they handed power away too easily. I saw Linda Park walk up, eyes swollen, holding a stack of papers. She looked at me like someone who had pulled her out of a storm, and also like someone she had misunderstood from the beginning. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I believed her. I thought you were the troublemaker. I looked at her without blame. I said, everyone wants to believe in a system. The problem is, when the system is in the wrong hands. Linda nodded, lips trembling. I'll hand over all the records. I'll tell the truth. The sun sank slowly. Evening wind moved across the lake and carried the stench up into my throat. I stood there, watching the water, and it felt like a mirror. It reflects what people pour into it, and it reflects what they try to hide. Marilyn was gone, but the trail she left behind was not. It was here, green, thick, and impossible to deny. And inside me, beneath the fatigue, there was a hard beam of light. When the truth begins to be spoken by the very people who once stood with Karen, that is when the fake power of an HOA president truly dies. Marilyn was handcuffed right in the town hall parking lot, under yellow lights, in front of the same people who used to clap for her. The click of metal locking shut was short and dry, like the final period on a voice that had spent too long giving orders. I was not there when it happened. I heard it from Deputy Cole, his voice low and tired, like a man who had finally set a heavy stone down after carrying it too far. He said they arrested Marilyn, not because she was unpleasant, but because the file was finally complete, because the evidence was thick, because the water samples had spoken for themselves, and because in the end, even the people in her own house could not take it anymore. Marcus confessed. Linda turned over the books. The landscaping contractor confirmed they acted under instructions from the HOA. And my video, along with the crowbar left in my yard, became the rope that tied every denial into a knot. Marilyn still tried to fight. She said it was a misunderstanding. She said it was for the community. She said she only wanted to protect property values. But when she said those things, people looked at her the way you look at someone standing in front of a green, stained lake and still calling it clear water. No one believed her anymore. Private beach was shut down. Tape was stretched around the sand. Warning signs stood in a line. The white lounge chairs were flipped sideways by the wind, like the bones of an advertising dream. Children were banned from the water. Mothers stared at the lake with eyes full of fear and anger. Men stood in small groups talking about lawsuits, about money, about how they had let someone like Marilyn hold the keys to the community fund. Dana worked nonstop. I saw her every day at the sampling station, dark circles under her eyes, but her hands still steady. She told me, her voice low, almost like she was talking to herself, "I've seen a lot of cases, but rarely one driven by personal hatred this extreme." I looked at her and saw something hard to name. The pain of nature being violated, and the anger of knowing people can be arrogant enough to believe they can control a moving current. I did not sleep easily either. At night I listened to the creek, and it sounded like a question. Did I do the right thing? Did I do enough? Did I go too far? Then I remembered the child who was blocked at the guard booth, the disappointment in his eyes when he heard you can't go in. I remembered the green-stained lake and the red sign. I remembered the chemical smell on my fingers the morning the fish died. And I understood. If I stayed silent, the cost could be the health of innocent people. If I fought with anger, Marilyn would turn me into the villain. I chose the harder path, the slower path, the paper trail path, the path where truth moves straight. 3 weeks later, heavy rain poured down for 2 straight days. The creek rose and washed away the thin scum along parts of the shore. The county pumped treatment, dredged sludge, installed a temporary filtration system. There was no instant miracle, but the toxic green began to fade. The stench eased. When I stood at the edge of the lake, I still saw damage, but I also saw something else, a community forced to face a truth they had avoided for too long. Linda came to my door, no longer carrying the same fear she had before. She handed me a letter. It was the decision to remove the entire old board. A new election would be held. The fund would be disclosed monthly. They would hire routine water testing, and they would take down the unreasonable residents-only signs from the trail. Linda said, her voice rough but clear. I thought the HOA was supposed to protect us, but it only protects us when the people in charge are afraid of the law. Marilyn wasn't afraid of the law. She was only afraid of losing face. I nodded. I did not give a speech. I only said one sentence I knew was true. The law doesn't need people to like it. It only needs people to respect it. 1 week after that, I went down to the creek and saw small fish returning. Not many, just a few flickers beneath the surface, like pieces of hope coming back. I sat down and let my hand dip into the flow. The water was still cold, but this time, it was a clean cold. Far off toward the HOA, there was no more loud promotion for private beach, no more drone footage of white sand. Instead, I heard people talking about repairing the drainage system, people calling each other to meetings, the sound of a community learning how to live again without a Karen standing in the middle with a microphone. That night, I opened my window and let the creek sound move through the house like an old lullaby. I thought about Marilyn, not to feel sorry, but to remember the lesson. Some people live on the feeling of control, and they forget there are things you cannot control: water, truth, and consequences. If you have ever lived in an HOA and met a Karen who used paperwork to bully others, leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from and how you dealt with it. If you want more stories where the underestimated person stands up through the law and through truth, tap like and subscribe to the channel. Here, we don't win by being louder. We win by standing in the right place, keeping the right evidence, and letting consequences flow to where they were always going to end up.